From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. It's great to be back in the studio with all of y'all and actually not having to do this in the middle of the night like I did last week at Hacker Summer Camp or very, very early in the morning. Either way, it's great to be back and live with all of y'all here. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've got a packed show for all of y'all today, so let's go ahead and get right to it. Before we get started, though, now that I'm back in the studio, I can get my espresso in my systems again. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. It's great to see so many people last week. Let's go ahead and get started with President Donald J. Trump's presidential campaign saying on Saturday that they were hacked, suggesting Iranian actors were involved in stealing and distributing sensitive internal documents. The campaign provided no evidence of Iran's involvement, but claims come a day after Microsoft issued a report detailing foreign agents' attempts to interfere in the U.S. campaign in 2024. It cited an instance of an Iranian military intelligence unit in June sending a spear phishing campaign to a high-ranking official of a presidential campaign from a compromised email account of a former senior advisor. Trump campaign spokesperson Stephen Chung blamed the attack on foreign sources hostile to the United States. Spokesperson for the NSC said in a statement that it takes any report of improper foreign interference extremely seriously. So Iran's mission was asked. They say we don't accord any credence to such reports. Again, Iran's on the brink here, folks. And we'll get to that here in just a minute. But Iran's back's against the wall. And this election matters a lot to Iran because obviously the current administration's been fairly soft on Iran. They've financed them. They've allowed them to do what they do. There's legitimate claims to say that this war wouldn't have lasted this long if not for the fact that we, in one hand, fund Israel and their defense, and in the other hand, we fund Iran and their proxies by removing sanctions on Iran and trying to get to some sort of nuclear deal with a country whose motto in their own Senate is death to America, the big devil. Those are the people we try to negotiate with. Iran, for their end, are accelerating online activity that appears to be intended to influence the U.S. election, in one case targeting a presidential campaign with an email phishing attack. This report came a day before the report of the Trump campaign email hack. The finding comes from Microsoft's newest threat intelligence reports showing Iran, which has been active in recent U.S. elections, is evolving its tactics for another election that's likely to have global implications. The report goes a step beyond anything U.S. intelligence officials have disclosed, giving specific examples of Iranian groups and the actions they have taken so far. The report doesn't specify Iran's intentions besides sowing chaos in the U.S. Iran's been funding all the pro-Hamas campaign, university campaign, camping, and all of that other stuff. Iran is actively involved in sowing discord in the U.S., influencing university students using social media to that impact. And so there's no denying the fact that they have a clear intent in keeping the current administration in lieu because it only helps them. So there's that. But Iran's internal strife, folks, is significant. Yesterday, the vice president for Iran, the former foreign minister Zarif, resigned due to differences with the newly elected president of Iran. Iran's readying for a potential full-scale war. They've been running drills in western Iran for the last several days. It's scheduled to go until Tuesday. This is from where they launched their predominantly missiles. So there is anticipation that potentially Tuesday, tomorrow, could see that as well. So if you're asking why you're seeing all of this now and how it all comes together, cyber is part of the battlefield. Obviously, it's another throne for them, and that's what they're going after. So you want to stay tuned to that. You want to understand your organization's potential impact, whether directly or indirectly to any of this, and you want to keep really, really poised across this. So again, they're looking to target voters, misinformation, disinformation, all of that coming from Iran. Don't just expect Iran to be on that end. Also expect China, Russia, and many other adversaries to get involved as well. ADT, a provider of alarm and physical security systems, the largest in the country has now confirmed that attackers have stolen customer information from its systems. In a filing with the SEC, ADT says attackers recently accessed certain databases containing customer order information. It's Monday morning and I can't talk. The company's investigation shows that the attackers obtained limited customer information, mainly email addresses, phone numbers, and postal addresses. The company has no reason to believe that any home security systems were compromised during the incident. The company has no reason to believe the attackers obtained other sensitive information like credit card data or banking information. They're continuing this investigation, and they say this will likely have no material breach. Again, we'll see about that as we get more information on the investigation and as due diligence and reporting has to come through. But this is, again, the SEC rule of determining material breach within 4 days, absolutely flawed. A lot to begin with. And most companies will say nothing in the first 4 days. And then 2 months later, they go, well, it's much worse than we actually thought. Because cybersecurity investigations take time. You've got to unfold, you've got to go through every single piece of data. And when you're a company that's large, that's really impactful, especially if you didn't have segmentation, right? So if you had network segmentation, if you had properly set up your network, you use the CIS top 18 as kind of your basis for your security operation framework, and you had segmented networks, you had segmented data, then it becomes a little bit easier to manage. However, a lot of companies, big or small, don't do that. And so what ends up happening is you've got to sift through petabytes worth of data. That becomes a very, very challenging task, all of within itself, especially with the timelines associated with it. And in a free data dump in the dark web, 2.7 billion records of personal information for people in the US were leaked on a hacking forum exposing names, social security numbers, all known physical addresses, and possible aliases. The data allegedly comes from the National Public Data, a company that collects and sells access to personal data for use in background checks, to obtain criminal records, and for private investigations. The National Public Data is believed to scrape this information from public sources and compile individual user profiles for people in the US and other countries. A threat actor known as US DoD claimed to be selling 2.9 billion records containing the personal data of people in the US, UK, and Canada that was stolen from the organization. They're now trying to sell the data for $3.5 million, claiming it contained records for every person in 3 countries. US DoD is a known threat actor who was linked to the InfraGard user data sale for 50 grand back in December of 2023. National Public Data has not replied to any responses from Bleepy Computer asking for more information. However, the breach may have been done by someone else, and we're not going to get into the whole thing. This is a significant data breach here, by the way, and it goes to a federal data privacy law. It goes to federal data breach notification laws. It goes to the need to actually reform the way we look at this in terms of setting standards for companies rather than just breach notification. So there's that as well. If you're and by the way, eliminating data brokers. There's no reason for a company to have this much data without a standard in play. And the fact is that until we understand that the way to start addressing the cybersecurity challenges that exist within our ecosystems is through standards, we will always be disadvantaged. Always. The U.S. Justice Department arrested a Nashville man named Matthew Isaac Newt, who's 38. He was helping North Koreans use a stolen identity to pose as Andrew M., a U.S. citizen, provided housing for company-provided laptops, and helped launder payments for remote IT workers to North Korean and Chinese accounts. This is coming on the heels of KnowBe4 saying, hey, we hired a dude for IT support. Turns out he was a North Korean kind of dude. So there's that. Newt is the second American arrested and charged with helping North Korea's hackers gain employment at American companies, further demonstrating how North Korea is stealing both jobs and funds from everyday citizens. The Justice Department arrested Christina Marie Chapman for running another laptop farm in her home in Arizona to make it look as if the North Korean workers were actually in the U.S. If you have not checked out our Substack, please make sure to go do that right now. jamesazar.substack.com. Also, make sure to subscribe, follow, share, like, and comment. Let's get into some run-throughs here. UpOmni analyzed 230 billion SaaS audit logs events from its own telemetry to examine behavior of bad actors that gain access to SAP apps. The researchers analyzed the entire data set drawn from 20 different SaaS platforms, looking for alert sequences And here is some of their findings. Perhaps the biggest single revelation is that the MITRE ATT&CK kill chain is barely relevant, or at least heavily abbreviated for most SaaS security incidents. Absolutely. That's not new. That's not a revelation. That's known. Anyone who's looked at the kill chain will tell you. Anyone will look at the kill chain will tell you to get into SaaS, all it takes is credentials. That's it. That's literally all it takes. You don't need to do persistence. Good job, Oponi. Bravo. Just listen. Nudge Security sponsors the show. Go check them out. Run a test on all your SaaS information. nudgesecurity.com/CyberHub. Get a 14-day free trial. You'll get more information. I mean, seriously, that kill chain isn't applicable to SaaS. Thanks for telling us. Really appreciate it. CISO, for their end, are letting people know that legacy Cisco smart install features are now being actively exploited by threat actors. The feature has been abused for years to take control of Cisco switches, but this isn't the first warning. CISO continues to see weak password types used on Cisco network devices. The agency noted on Thursday, a Cisco password type is the type of algorithm used to secure Cisco device's password within a system config file. Once access is granted, a threat actor would be able to access system config files easily. They can actually configure files and system passwords. They can enable victims to do that. As of right now, 6,000 IPs are still unpatched. A newly discovered open SSH vulnerability in the free PSD systems has been reported. The flaw CVE 2024-7589 could allow attacker to execute remote code with root privileges without any prior authentication. The vulnerability affects all supported versions of free PSD. So all in all, there's a few workarounds. If patching is not feasible, administrators can mitigate the risk by setting the login grace time to 0 in the /etc/ssh/sshd_config file and restarting the SSHD service. This adjustment eliminates the remote code execution risk, but may expose the system to denial of service attacks due to exhaustion of all Mac startup connections. So you want to make sure you get that patched up. Crowdstrike is dismissing an explosive claim from a Chinese security research firm that the Flacon EDR sensor bug that blue screen millions of Windows computers could be exploited for privilege escalation or remote code execution. Kihu 360 says the direct cause of the blue screen of death loop is a memory corruption issue during opcode verification, opening the door for potential local privilege escalation of remote code execution attacks. For their end, CrowdStrike says, nope, not true. Saying not going to happen. So there's that. Staying in China, a series of targeted cyber attacks that started at the end of July targeted dozens of systems used in Russian government organizations and IT companies are being linked to Chinese hackers of APT 31 and 27. Kaspersky discovered the activity, dubbed the campaign Eastwind, reporting that it employs an updated version of Cloud Sorcerer backdoor spotted in similar cyber espionage campaigns from May. And again, China worried about Russia's thought process, worried about Russia's economy. Right now, the Russian economy primarily relies on trade with China and Iran. However, as the war in Ukraine starts to hit kind of a moment of standstill and negotiations and some sort of truth will be taking place in the first or second quarter, China's trying to gain some insights into Russia in order to do that as well. So something to keep an eye on. These geopolitical events really do impact business in more ways than you think. If your company's anywhere within that supply chain, it's part of a target. You may not be the direct target, but they're going to use you to get to someone else. So you just want to always keep that in mind. Always. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, live with all the latest and greatest. Until then, please make sure to subscribe, follow, share, comment below. Let us know your thoughts. And most importantly, have a great, great week and stay cyber safe. Thanks for tuning in.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.